Jim, this question for the late night drive-thru comes from Brian Burke in Wilmington, Delaware. Hi, Jim. I am fascinated with the old Techwood Drive studio. Where do I begin? First, the outside looks like no other arena I've ever seen. I sent a photo of it to two friends asking what they thought the building was. One said a library, the other said a mental institution. Can you please tell me as much as you feel like telling me about this place? How many fans did it hold? What was the place like in general? Were there regular rats passed around by the boys? I've always been amazed at how well the fans in action were mic'd so that it sounded decent, even with so few fans in attendance.
Well, it wasn't an arena to begin with. It was the corporate headquarters and offices of Turner Broadcasting at the time. It was a building that was built to look like an old Southern plantation type of thing with the white columns out front and everything. And you see a lot of those down in Georgia that are business complexes and everything. And the studio was down in one part of it, but that studio was just one room. It wasn't even a 25th of the entire building, but that was where they did, anything from, dinner and a movie with that guy and girl that I couldn't stand to watch. I can't remember their names, but any TBS program that was shot by TBS in their studios or commercials or whatever during the late 80s period was done in that studio just because that was their studio in their building. It only held about 120-something people, but it's a television studio. So, of course, everybody's mic'd good because, the crowd wasn't 30 feet from Tony Schiavone's announcer mic that he's standing there talking into handheld. And the sound was good because, did I mention it was a TV studio? So we used to have to dress in, there was a storage area with some lockers and some things that were stored that I usually dressed in. Some of the other guys went into the office cubicles because those people were usually not working on Saturday morning where we usually taped. So you could imagine some woman comes to work on Monday morning and she finds some goddamn, balled up, sweaty fucking jock strap or whatever that some guys accidentally left behind her desk on Saturday morning. I'm sure that happened a bunch. But no, the guys went in, dressed wherever you could find a place. Like I said, that storage area or over in the cubicles. You walked 25 feet and there was the studio, and you came from around the edge of the curtain. That was the entranceway. And right behind the curtain was the control room where they had all the monitors and all the switches and everything. And that's where the producer of the show, which was Dusty, sat behind the big desk and told everybody what to do, except when it was time for him to go out and cut a promo or have a match. And then that's what he did. And then JJ would be next to him and or covering for him if he was out on the air.
You appeared there in 1983. You, of course, were a regular from 85 until they ceased using Techwood Drive at the beginning of 1989. And you've seen tapes of all the stuff in between. What was your favorite look of the Techwood Drive studio?
I have to think that the late 70s, early 80s Georgia Championship Wrestling, where they had the flags and the set and Gordon looked so good, and the whole thing. But they upgraded actually when Crockett started doing the World Championship Wrestling show, the logo that they had behind there that we tore up one time when Ronnie Garvin and Barry Windham got in a fight with the Midnight, and we tore the backdrop down without actually meaning to, and certainly weren't told to do it. We didn't get yelled at though, because it was a great brawl. But those, I just love the old studio wrestling shows looks where they'd have flags from different countries or, the NWA logo or, just bullshit like that. It didn't have to look like it cost $1 million. It looked cool to me.
What was your thoughts when you found out at the beginning of 1989 that you were going to be leaving Techwood Drive and going to Center Stage? And of course, what were your initial thoughts of Center Stage?
Well, actually, when we found out that we were leaving because we told them we quit. That was when we gave our notice. The first time, because when George Scott became the booker and after our first meeting with him, we immediately went and gave our notice, said, we're going to be finishing up as soon as our contract is up, which I believe was the middle of April of 89. And at that point, right before that was when George Scott botched the Clash and didn't promote the Flair Steamboat match because he thought it would hurt the house shows. And the Clash did an all-time low rating. There was only like 3,000 people in a fucking Superdome or whatever. And they fired George Scott before we had a chance to finish up. And they asked us to stay. And we said, no, we need a rest anyway. So we'll come back. And we're going to take a couple months off and we're going to fulfill our commitments we'd made to Dundee because he was booking Continental and get some rest. And then, you know, we'll come back. That was when I first had to start meeting with Jim Hurd. But in the interim, the last TBS shows we did were, as I recall, were at the studio. And during April and May, by the time we returned in June, that's when they started doing center stage. So they started it. And then that's when we came back for the World Tag Team Championship tournament. The first time we were in center stage was that summer. And I recall it was great because it was great atmosphere and it looked great on camera. But by the same token, it was one of those free babysitting deals because admission was, they wanted to get a crowd in there and admission was free. And this time they had to fill up 500, 600, 700 seats. So every small unattended African-American child within the walking distance of the building, and that takes into account a lot of people, were in there. So they were making a ton of noise, but they weren't anybody that was going to buy any wrestling tickets.
From the national television debut of the Freebirds to Roddy Piper turning babyface by saving Gordon Soley from Don Morocco, to Ric Flair making out with a mannequin, to the return of Ricky Steamboat as a surprise partner for Eddie Gilbert, there were many great moments in Techwood Drive. Do you have a very favorite moment from Techwood Drive Wrestling?
Well, and actually probably when the original Midnight and Paul Lee jumped us and everybody was flabbergasted because nobody knew it was going to happen. And it was a big surprise and a shock and et cetera. And that was a flawlessly executed angle that drew absolutely no money whatsoever because of the botched upness of the Office at that time. But of all the things that we did, probably more people remember that. And probably it was because it was my angle. That's probably my favorite thing we did there. I mean, we had title matches on TV with the Rock and Roll Express, and we did, with promos and all that stuff and everything. But that angle probably was my favorite thing we did at Techwood. And then, of course, did I mention it didn't draw a fucking dime? But it wasn't our fault. We did it flawlessly.